Good morning. Can we go ahead and hear a test from someone on the Zoom call? Try that again. Good morning. Would someone mind giving me a test on the Zoom call?
Loud and clear. This is Grady.
This is Kathy Blumenfeld.
This is Omar Pride.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, with everything up and working and our microphone tutorial complete, I would ask Michael to entertain a roll.
Here. Alderman Bob Bauman. Here. Alderman Bob Bauman.
Here.
Mr. Grady Crosby.
Here.
Senator Alberta Darling. Mr. Mark Flaherty. Representative Kaylin Haywood. Mayor Cavalier Johnson. Senator Latanya Johnson. Mr. James Cantor.
Here.
Secretary Kathy Blumenfeld.
Here.
Mr. Scott Mansky.
Here.
Mr. Greg Marcus. Mayor Dennis McBride.
Here.
Joanne Sabir. Ms. Joanne Sabir.
Here.
Representative Joe Sanfilippo. Ms. Aicha Sawa.
Here.
Mr. Omar Sheikh.
Here.
Alderwoman Jocasta Zamaripa.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much, Michael. First, I would like to congratulate the new Secretary of DOA, Secretary Blumenfeld. Thank you so much, and congrats on your appointment, and welcome to the board. And we look forward to having you and being a great participant and much improved from our previous DOA Secretary that was on our board.
Thank you very much. Follow in big shoes.
First order of business will be the discussion and approval of the meeting minutes from October 22nd, which was our last board meeting. So if there's any discussion, if not, I would seek a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second, Senator Johnson.
Great, thank you. All in favor of approval of the meeting minutes from October of 2021, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Great. With that, I will turn it over to Steve for our financial update and report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's update will include a review of the forecasted 21 income statement as well as the capital expenditure budget summary. We will also review the 12-month projected operational and restricted cash positions. Overall, today's financial news regarding 2021 is positive. But before we go through what I think will be one of our last reviews of 21 activity, a quick update regarding 22. You'll notice there are no financial exhibits for the 22 fiscal year in your packet today. At this time, we continue to forecast the budget the board adopted in October. We are closely monitoring any and all impacts to our business stemming from the latest COVID-19 surge driven by the Omicron variant. At this time, we're happy to report that any negative impact to our business has been very minimal over the past 30 days. Unfortunately, 2 of our team events had to postpone games in December, one for the Wave and one for the Admirals. However, we expect both games to be rescheduled with the resulting income hitting the 22 financials. As for activity planned in 22, the event calendar remains full, and we've not seen any cancellations or postponements. To the contrary, we're in fact adding event activity to the calendar, certainly since our budget presentation in October. We will continue to monitor developments and impact to the business and adjust our planning accordingly throughout the upcoming year. A couple of other quick updates. Number one, since we last met as a group in October, the district closed on the bond transaction that refinanced the Series 2013 theater debt. Annually, we can expect to save approximately $240,000 per year in debt service payments as a result of this refinancing. And number two, Baker Tilly conducted their preliminary audit fieldwork in December. The finance team will be spending the better part of the next 45 days preparing for their primary fieldwork, which is scheduled to occur in March. And as a reminder, Baker Tilly will be presenting their audit report to this board in May. So onto the financial statements, and we'll start with the income statement on page 8 of your packet with column IDs E, F, G, and H at the top, which shows a comparison of the 21 budget, column E, to the 21 annual forecast, column F. You can see on line 67, column G, we expect to exceed our budget net income before depreciation by a remarkable $7.6 million, more than double what we budgeted to achieve. And while these numbers are preliminary, and we may see some movement as we true up year-end results for the audit, I don't expect to see a material change in the bottom line results. And again, aside from the audit presentation in May, this will likely be the last time we review 21, which is too bad, because I do think we have a really good story to tell about this year. Some of you may recall a year ago at this time, at this meeting, Marty and I were already advising you, the board, that we would be revising down our projections for 21, largely due to an expected decrease in tax collections during first and second quarter. And frankly, we were uncertain about the event activity that would or would not occur in the upcoming year. At the same time, the vaccine event was just getting underway in our ballroom, and I think it was impossible to really predict the magnitude of the success of that event. And without trying to overstate this, that event may have been as financially important to the district as was the June 2020 bond refinancing deal in terms of how we got through this pandemic as an organization. Providing the district's ballroom for the purpose of administering upwards of 145,000 vaccines provided operational cash flow that allowed us to keep the lights on, keep our employees working, and really bought us time for when normal business activity got back underway later that summer. The financial impact of that event ripples through lines 1 through 28 on the income statement and really sustained us for the first half of 2021. And while those financial successes are incredibly important, it's nothing compared to the immeasurable impact that that event had in the community. Not only did the results of that event provide real protection against a terrible disease, it also gave hope to many in our community where none existed. This event was the embodiment of our BPX credo. As the vaccine clinic was to the first and second quarter of 21 in terms of financial impact, so was the Beyond Van Gogh event to the third and fourth quarter. We could have not hoped for a more successful event. Not only did this bring in meaningful net income, but it also exposed the convention center to the local community in a way that many hadn't seen before. Both the vaccine clinic and the Beyond Van Gogh event produced higher margins for the district than we'd otherwise expect to see for an entertainment or concert event or even a week-long convention. And that somewhat explains why we see such an uptick in operating revenues lines 1 through 14, but not a corresponding uptick in operating expenses lines 15 through 29. Due to the duration of those two events, the timing of when those two events occurred in the middle of a pandemic, and the nature of those two events, and that it did not call for large masses of people to gather at any one time, it really was a remarkable set of circumstances that we were able to leverage to turn into incredible success in 21. One other highlight of 21, and it pertains to operating revenues and specifically line 13, we received over the summer a grant just north of $980,000 from the Small Business Administration as part of the Save Our Venues grant program. Opportunities for outside assistance such as this were few and far between for the district. We did not qualify for many of these grants due to our unique government entity-like status. That grant, along with the grant provided to us by the DOA at the end of 2020, were very meaningful and an important part of how we shored up operational cash flow throughout the year. Lines 30 through 35 tax revenues, that was quite a roller coaster ride for us in 21, beginning with the write-down of those numbers that occurred as part of the January 21 reforecast. However, in second quarter, we began to see a recovery in this category. And as the months went along, we began to chip away in large chunks at the early season deficits to the point now where we're projecting to, according to the financials, miss budget by only 3%. Now, that was an accurate statement up to about 2 days ago. The tax numbers you see here reflect actual results for the first 10 months of the year, plus our January forecast projections for November and December. On Wednesday, we received from the Department of Revenue the November actual results, which came in better than forecast by about 10%. So provided December comes in no worse than our current conservative estimate, we will see positive movement in this category before we close the books for the year. As you scroll down to lines 42 through 65, you'll notice a lot of positive variation in these expense categories relative to budget. The biggest variance, of course, is line 50, Visit Milwaukee. The budget number of $4.6 million was established in October of 20, before we knew about the nosedive that tax revenues would take in the fourth quarter of that year. Because visits payment in 21 is based primarily off of revenues collected in 20, the fourth quarter slide caused us to write down that expense early on, a matter we communicated to Visit with extreme haste so that they could better plan for their year. Other line items worth noting, unemployment compensation, line 44, was not nearly as high as we had anticipated, again due in part to our ability to put people back to work sooner and longer because of the vaccine clinic and Beyond Van Gogh. On the flip side of that, line 59, recruiting expense has increased due to a much tighter labor market, and also because of professional services related to filling some senior level positions within the organization. You'll see other puts and takes along the way, mostly to the better, as management worked hard to manage down non-operating expenses in 21. And that leads us back to line 67, and really the punchline of 2021, which was we doubled our net income before depreciation expense during really an unprecedented time in the world, something that we as an organization, including this board, should be very proud of. Are there any questions on the income statement? Yes, Scott.
So on line 21, the total event expense, why is the annual forecast a negative number?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Total event expense is where we book expenses related to putting a show on here at the district. The negative number there is really driven by Van Gogh. For most any other event, we typically plan to see a loss in this category or close to a break even on the settlement report with the promoter, which we booked to this line. And that's okay because we make up that loss and then some on other revenue streams such as food and beverage and box office revenue. The opposite occurred with Van Gogh, in which food and beverage and box office revenues were very light. But the promoter profit, a term we use internally here, so to speak, was extremely high. And that was just the nature of how this deal was put together, Scott. So this negative expense, so to speak, is really revenue that came off of our settlement with that show. The next exhibit, the CapEx budget, which is page 11 of your packets. Most of the year, I've included this exhibit in its budget form only. Part of the reason was there wasn't much to report. If you recall, part of our COVID mitigation plan was to defer CapEx projects into third and fourth quarter so that we could react more smartly to any changes in our business environment and also address those critical infrastructure issues that were unforeseen when we put together the original budget in October of 20. Scrolling down to line 35, you can see we expect to come in slightly under budget by about $175K. You'll notice that there are some projects that we expected to take on that didn't occur, and some projects we took on that weren't previously planned for, and those are listed on page 12 as part of our contingency summary. The total budget number of $1.5 million is not what we'd expect to see in terms of spend in a normal operating year, a non-pandemic year. We were intentional in keeping this number low in '21 as we worked our way out of the doldrums of the pandemic. In future years, we do expect to be spending upwards of $3 million per year in capital infrastructure. And one final note on CapEx, while we're forecasting these items in this management report as occurring in '21, it's very possible some of these projects don't hit our books until '22 as we deal with the long lead times pertaining to product and materials as a result of the supply chain crunch. Pages 13 and 14 represent our cash projections for the next 12 months. Page 13 is our unrestricted position. The numbers you see here represent our '22 budget numbers, but for the starting balance in January. And that's actually higher relative to budget based on better performance in '21, which means we're expecting to end '22 with a higher cash balance than budget. Certainly good news there. And page 14 represents the restricted position. Again, you've heard me say this many times over the past 12 months. Management is very pleased with the balance of this account and its projection to continue to grow over the next 12 months. Mr. Chairman, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, the news regarding '21 is positive. We were faced with very challenging circumstances at the onset of the year, and through careful planning, hard work, and I would say a bit of luck, we came out on the other side stronger and well-positioned to seize opportunities for growth in '22. That is my report.
Great, thank you, Steve. Yes, very positive. You're considering all the circumstances. Does anybody have any questions for Steve? Yes, Senator Darling.
I think that this reflects, as you said, planning, hard work, and luck. And I applaud you for that. I know it was really a hard time, and I appreciate all the work you did to keep everything floating in the right direction. And I appreciate that the staff morale was very strong, because I know it was a very tough time. But as a citizen and as a board member, I want to thank you and all the staff for your work.
Thank you, Senator.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you, and I think we can all echo that. That's very good. But as we say, on to '22, so. Thank you, Steve. In all honesty, it was a great year, and thanks for your hard work against that. With that, I'll turn it over to Marty and Mike for an expansion update, and I think the CO reports later, but we'll go with the expansion update. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to have Mike Abrams from CAA Icon present an update on the expansion project to the board. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. It's good to see everybody again. I'd like to do a quick project update. We will have a graphic up here on the screen in a minute. But overall, very good progress on site. As everybody knows, we started the project doing site demolition and pre-demo surveys back in late summer in August. Everything is currently on schedule with the project. As you can hear around this area of town, within a few blocks around the project site, we continue to install our deep foundation pile system. We're approximately 70% complete, which is the graph in the center and the upper side of the page. We have about 3.5 weeks or so left of the noisier pile installations before we start micro pile installations, which don't have as much impact to the neighborhood. So everything is trending well on that. Quick design update as we're wrapping up design efforts into the first half of this year. Our concrete, our steel, vertical transportation, and our big operable wall partition bids were received several weeks ago. We are finalizing scopes and contracting with those firms currently. We have another bid package that's going out onto the street here in about a week on our enclosure scopes, which is we're receiving bids back on the enclosure bids for roofing, exterior wall, and glass scopes of work. Our mechanical, electrical, plumbing bids out in late February. Those plans are being sent out early next week. We continue to have design meetings throughout the first quarter and some of the second quarter of '22, mostly concentrating on interiors, finished materials, and some of our, what we call FF&E, our furniture, fixtures, and equipment. We also had the pleasure of touring the Furniture Mart in Chicago earlier this week. Our design team went down there with several of us here from the district to meet with potential manufacturers of office furniture and pre-function furniture. On the graph on the screen in the upper left corner, our on-site safety update. We have right now currently about 70 crew persons on site on average. We have nearly 32,000 hours, labor hours on site with no lost time incidents. So everything's going well so far on the project site with safety. Our contracting status, currently we've had the 3 early subcontractors on board. We have 4 pending contracts right now with the steel and the concrete and the vertical transportation scopes I just mentioned. And we think somewhere between, probably 40 or 50 trade contractors will be contracted with for the project eventually. Most of them being in the very last bidding period, which is going to be early summer. Upcoming milestones in the left bottom corner of the screen. We've been working in Exhibit Hall D to create basically a new exterior wall partition. It's a sound and air and moisture barrier that was placed in the last 4 weeks up there, full height, fully painted out and finished, just like the similar to Hall D's finishes. It's inward of the outside wall right now. We are planning on taking the precast wall panels off the very north exterior wall. We're starting the prep work on that here in the next few days, and then possibly towards the end of next week. If you're around the district, you'll start seeing wall panel removal off the north building, or the north side of the existing building. That wall system was always designed and built for future expansion. That being precast panels are very, I would say easy, but they're easier to disassemble off the exterior wall and expand the exhibit hall to the north. Driven piles, like I mentioned, complete in about 3 more weeks, so about the 3rd week of February. And then our concrete, our foundations, and we have 2 levels of concrete decking. That's going to start sometime mid to late February. Earlier this week, we had a air lease committee meeting on the 4 air leases that we have around the project. And we are scheduled for our City Planning Commission meeting on Monday, the 24th of this month, to continue discussions about air rights. Our committed costs, the graph in the upper right corner, is where we're at as far as contracting percentages. So the 2 colored sections on the graph, the 13 and the 33, carry us through the first 2 bid packages. So 46% complete here in the next few weeks as far as getting subcontractors on board. You can see kind of the percentages for the last 3 bid packs and how that's split up. Last, I would like to give a quick update on our diversity and inclusion goals. In the bottom section of the page, illustrates both business and workforce inclusion goals and current actual percentages. So as a reminder, we have a combination 31% goal between MBE, WBE, and DVBE. The left side, where you see the gray and the green graphic, is the business inclusion side. Starting on the left side, we had a 25% goal for MBE. We're at 21% currently. WBE was at 5% goal. We're at 11% currently, and DVBE was at 1%, and we are currently at 1%. So overall, for business inclusion, we're exceeding the goals by 2%, currently at 33%. For workforce, same percentage goals, 31% overall. The MBE workforce currently is at 31% total. Our WBE is at 4% out of 5. And we don't have any current DV workforce percentage included. For total workforce of 35%, so we exceed that by 4% currently. Our RPP, which is the Residence Preference Program, which is the city program, we have a 40% goal for RPP workers. We are currently at 29%, but the last graph to the right is our targeted RPP for our special impact areas, which are the 8 zip codes within the city that we have targeted RPP for. That was a 25% goal, and currently we're at 28%, so we're exceeding that by 3%. So we'll continue to work on and focus on RPP over the next few months. We're working with Prism currently right now. That's our workforce consultant, and we have a planned outreach event right now at Employ Milwaukee, third week of March, that we will advertise on the, get the word out, advertise on buildingmore.com on the district's website. That's an overall kind of current status snapshot of the building progress, if anybody has any questions. Yeah, Mark?
How are you doing with pricing? I mean, we're doing a couple projects and we're 20 to 40% over. And how's that going to affect the budget?
We definitely right now are having some pressures on the budget because of escalation and inflation. We're seeing certain scopes of work right now between, say, 10 or 20% compared to even the last time that we budgeted the project on certain material. Steel, rebar, definitely. We're bidding out mechanical, electrical, plumbing in 5-6 weeks or so, and we could see more of the same with that.
Is the contingency holding out?
It is so far, yes.
Okay.
We had good percentage of design contingency in there. We continue to look at all aspects of the project still to make sure we're spending in the right areas as well. So as we see some pressures on the budget due to inflation and escalation, we're also doubling back and making sure that we don't have language in the specs and the drawings that are above and beyond what that we need. So we continue to, I would say, sort of continue to do VE, value engineering exercises throughout the entire design process. It's definitely a concern, and we're dealing with it on a daily basis. Any other questions for expansion? Okay, thank you.
Just briefly, we'll go over, when we've had some changes due to personnel, either reelected, not reelected, other issues and opportunities. So I thought Kirk thought it'd be just good to go over where we are with everybody as the board composition, as we look at things as we move forward into the expansion. And again, Mike, thanks for the update.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, as Mr. Cantor has alluded to, there's been some changes in individuals who are holding certain local and state offices, and we've gotten some questions with regard to how that those changes affect or don't affect this board. So just kind of a small update on it. So first, it's important to think of the board as really composed of two groups: individuals who are appointed to the board, and then individuals who are on the board due to a position that that individual holds. From an appointment perspective, individuals who are appointed to be on the board, that individual is going to hold the seat for their 3-year term, subject to reappointment, so long as that individual continues to satisfy the requirements of the appointment. I generally think of these as our private sector members, but it does also include some public sector members, those who are appointed by the Common Council President. And so long as those individuals hold either private employment and the correct residency, or in the public sector members, public employment and the residency requirements, they continue to hold those positions regardless of whether or not there's a shift in the appointing authority. To that end, when Mayor Barrett resigned to assume the ambassador post in Luxembourg, it had no effect on the appointments that he had made to the board. Similarly, when Alderman Johnson assumed the acting mayor role, it had no effect on his appointments to the board as Common Council President. The other group are those who hold positions due to an office that the individual holds, and some of those also have the ability to designate that responsibility to another individual. So for example, the leaders of each chamber of the Wisconsin legislature in both parties has a position on this board which they can either choose to fill or delegate to another member of the chamber. In our case, all 4 offices have delegated this role to other individuals within the chamber. So for example, when Minority Leader Hintz stepped down recently, we reached out to Minority Leader Neubauer to determine if she would be joining the board, delegate to Representative Haywood to continue to serve, or select another individual. And Representative Neubauer had responded that Representative Haywood would continue to sit on the board as the appointee of the Assembly Minority Leader. So glad to have you continuing. Similarly, when Secretary Brennan stepped down as the Secretary of Administration, Secretary Blumenfeld had to make a similar determination as to whether or not she would serve or appoint a designee. And Secretary Blumenfeld, it's my understanding that you are serving, so welcome to the board.
Thank you.
High level, though, I mean, at the end of the day, just know that Marty, Jim, senior leadership at the district, and your legal counsel is watching this and being proactive to ensure that we're fulfilling our statutory requirements. If there are any questions now or at any time, please feel free to reach out to Marty or myself, and we can assist with it.
Thanks, Kirk. Are there any questions of Kirk with all that? That's a long way to get Representative Hayward back onto the board, but we are glad to have you on for sure. Great. Thank you, Kirk. Marty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the lesson on how to use the microphone as well. I appreciate that. First, like to thank everyone for attending today, and those of you who are joining us virtually. I look forward to the day when both the pandemic has left us and your schedules permit you to be here in person. We miss having everyone face-to-face sitting around the same table. I'd also like to officially welcome Secretary Blumenfeld to the WCD board. We look forward to your future years of service with us. And I'll segue that to an acknowledgement and thank you to Joel Brennan for his years of service to the board with Discovery World and then as DOA Secretary. He is someone who has contributed immensely to our growth, and we'll miss him at this table, and just want to publicly acknowledge his years of service and thank him for same. As Steve discussed, we had a very strong end of 21 as a result of events returning in person to our building and sports and entertainment events progressing in person, as well as the hotel taxes exceeding expectations. Steve, one of the things that you didn't mention, and as neither you nor I want to ever stop talking about 21, when we restructured the debt service in the Miller High Life Theater that Steve referenced, and which will result in an approximately $240,000 annual savings. What you didn't mention, and you have in the past, is that we did not push out the date in which that debt service is paid off. So we have the savings with not extending the debt beyond what it had been. So we weren't mortgaging the present and pushing it down the line for years to come. Steve's talked about the vaccination clinic and Beyond Van Gogh, and we can't give enough credit to what those two events meant to us for 2021. BVG's final show was 2 weeks ago, and it saw over 200,000 people attending Exhibit Hall A of our exhibition level, breaking and setting a new attendance record for any single event in Wisconsin Center District properties. What's important to keep in mind about Beyond Van Gogh is that that is an opportunity that under normal non-COVID influenced years would never have presented itself to us. When we saw this time last year an exodus of events canceling and leaving our exhibition space, the one thing it gave us plenty of was space. And in a time where people were not going to public meetings, an opportunity to book other conventions and meetings that was available because meetings and conventions were canceling was going to be very challenging. So being able to find such an opportunity, book it for such an extended period of time was fabulous for us, but is not our core business. And while we are continuing discussions with this promoter to bring another of their shows to our property in space that will be available because it's otherwise not rented. Our focus is meetings, conventions, special events, private events, and that will not change. So there may be opportunities that you see outside of our property that you think may be compelling. We certainly want to hear about them, but compelling doesn't necessarily match with our business plan, which is really supporting the hotel business, restaurants, bars, and bringing people downtown. So again, great event, love it, and wish it were still here. Recognize it was an opportunity we were able to seize because we had nothing but space, and it was a great way to bring money and people back to work that otherwise would not have been the case. When I talk about the success of Beyond Van Gogh and the vaccination clinic, I don't want to go too far with those accolades without acknowledging to the staff and sharing with the board how important our performance in executing, although different than we had anticipated, a reconfigured DNC in August of 20, and then the election recount in November of 2020. Those events did a number of things for us. It enabled us to learn firsthand how to operate in a COVID pandemic environment with safety protocols that while we believed our facility was safe and clean, this brought a new measure of magnification to how we were looking at the facility as well as attendees and users. So the opportunity to work those events during this period of time gave us a tremendous advantage in being able to attract and get the confidence for people to come here for the events that we've mentioned and others, all of the events for 2021. I would like to thank, although I don't believe any of them are here in person, but I would like to thank and give a shout out to our part-time staff. We were very deliberate in making sure that we were doing everything possible, not only to make sure our facility was safe and clean, but make sure our staff was educated, not only about what we were doing to make sure that it was safe and clean, but have them involved in making sure that they saw that these actions were not just for our guests, but also very much so for their own safety. And I want to thank them for, during that period of time, coming to work, having the confidence in us that they were coming to work in an environment that was not going to put them or their families at risk. And certainly we're all still struggling to get labor in our facilities, but we couldn't have succeeded if it weren't for the part-time staff coming in and trusting in us and fulfilling what we need to get done. Looking ahead through 2022, we're seeing tremendous activity, as Steve has indicated. The Miller High Life Theater has already confirmed 7 public events, 22 private events. Panther Arena has 28 Admirals games remaining for the season, 9 UWM Panther games, 10 Wave games, 3 other publicly ticketed events, 15 private events, and that's just through early summer. We continue to see inquiries and bookings for meetings and conventions in all 3 of our properties, and we are very encouraged on how 22 is looking. Even though we're all dealing with COVID-19 at this point, and I remember saying the same thing in March 6th of 2020, I think it was, that we hadn't lost anything yet, and then a week later we lost everything. But thus far, while we've seen some attendance variances from what we had expected, we have not lost any events, and as Steve indicated, we continue to see entertainment, sports, and meetings and conventions business, special event business coming onto the books for 22. So we're still thinking 22 is going to be better than 21 was. Yesterday morning, Mayor Johnson signed the mask requirement ordinance, and we will certainly be complying with that ordinance as it takes effect. In a previous meeting, I introduced and acknowledged Steve Harms, who started with us in August as our Vice President of Corporate Partnerships. Steve and the team from Legends have begun soliciting interest in the naming rights sponsorships for the expansion. They've already had second meetings and given customized presentations to several organizations. We've only begun this process. It's going to be long, and certainly I will be the most impatient person of the lot, but we are encouraged by the warm reception that we're seeing from local, regional, and national businesses to meet with them. So more to come on that, but it's progressing in a very optimistic way. On the personnel front, last week we announced to the staff the hiring of Brian Rutkowski. Brian will be joining us January 31st as our Vice President and General Manager. Brian comes to us with over 2 decades of event and venue management experience. He and I will be working closely to further develop our event and operations team, ensuring our ability to deliver, being bold, proud, and experience obsessed, and preparing us for the grand opening of the expansion, which is only a short 2 years away. Several weeks ago, it was announced that Live Nation, the world's largest concert promoter, intends to build 2 venues on property owned by Summerfest. From the district's management team's perspective, this does raise concern about the addition of another mid-sized capacity venue that could negatively impact the economics of our own Miller High Life Theater. So we will be watching how that progresses, and we are not changing any plans for our thoughts on what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now, but I do want to raise to the board, who may not think to consider that another mid-sized venue could very much affect the economics of a venue we own and operate. At our last board meeting in October, the board unanimously approved and authorized us to move forward with, under the terms and conditions for the Visit Milwaukee agreement, and I'm pleased to, I should have led with this, Peggy, I'm sorry. I'm pleased to announce that I think it was mid-November, Peggy and I did execute that agreement. It's in place, and we look forward to at least the next 4 years of a tremendous partnership. Mr. Chairman, I open the floor to any questions that there may be from what I've already discussed, after which I'm requesting that we move into closed session in order for me to apprise the board of a contract I would like you to consider.
Right, great, thank you, Marty. Any questions for Marty before we entertain that? Okay, great. And since there are 2 items designated for closed session on the agenda, my suggestion is that we enter into closed session on both at the same time. The board does have the authority to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.851E for purposes of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public funds or conducting other specific public business. The board also has the authority to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Section 19.851C to consider the employment, compensation, or performance evaluation of certain WCD employees over which the WCD board does have the jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. The board is expected to reconvene in open session following this agenda item. I would like to entertain a motion to go into closed session for both of these purposes, and at the conclusion of the closed session, bless you, the board will engage in any action necessary following the closed session. Do I have a motion to move?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second? All in favor of moving to closed, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. We will now move into closed session, so give us a minute, those on the phone and on video. Waiting for Mike to open up the feed. We're open? Okay. Now we're back into open session, and I would ask if there is a motion on the performance bonus for Mr. Brooks.
I make that motion.
And what percent?
Full percent. The full amount of the bonus.
Great. Do we have a second? All right, we will go to vote. All in favor of the full performance?
Mr. Chair, I ask for a
Yes.
roll call.
Great, so we'll go for a roll call vote. Michael?
Alderman Bauman,
No.
Mr. Grady Crosby,
Aye.
Senator Alberta Darling, Mr. Mark Flaherty,
Aye.
Representative Caitlin Haywood, Mayor Cavalier Johnson, Senator Latanya Johnson, Mr. James Cantor,
Aye.
Secretary Blumenfeld,
I'm not authorized to vote yet until all my paperwork is done.
Mr. Scott Mansky,
Aye.
Mr. Greg Marcus, Mayor Dennis McBride,
Aye.
Ms. Joanne Sabir, Ms. Aicha Sawa,
Aye.
Mr. Omar Sheikh,
Aye.
Alderwoman Jocasta Zamaripa. It passes. Yes. One, two.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. With that, we are, I think we're ready to adjourn, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of adjourn? Aye. Any opposed? Great. We are adjourned. Have a fantastic weekend, and go Packers. Thank you.